Well, thanks very much, Meta. Great to be here. And thank you for the opportunity to talk to you all about Jobs and Skills Australia today. And I would also like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting, the Boonwurrung and Wurrung Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to pay tribute to NCVER, both for this very important conference and also reciprocate what Simon said about the excellent collaborative relationship between Jobs and Skills Australia, before us, the National Skills Commission, and NCVER. We are indeed highly complementary, and I think that will be very clear. I hope you'll think it's clear in my presentation, where there are a number of references to NCVER and data, particularly that come from the NCVER. So what I thought I'd talk about today, and the Minister, I thought, gave quite a nice introduction to the role of JSA, is, if I can get this thing going. There we go. Is those three things. What is JSA's role, and how are we thinking about our work plan? Number one. Number two, JSA's analysis and advice on skills needs and skill shortages. The Minister said quite a bit about that subject, so talk to you about some of our approach to analysing skills needs and skill shortages. And thirdly, very important thing that NCVER is very engaged in, JSA is very engaged in, and many of you in this room, and that's expanding the evidence base on which we can provide our advice to the national skills system, to governments, and to all the other partners in the system. So expanding evidence base, extremely important. And in particular, I want to talk to you about the VET national data asset that draws on NCVER VET total activity data, which is a very exciting project that JSA is working on with the ABS, combining NCVER data with other immersive data sources to provide fantastic new insights into how VET students progress through their study into employment, maybe out of income support and so on. And we're getting very close to being able to release results from that survey, and you'll get a little bit of a preview of some of that data in this presentation. So, part one. What is our role and our associated work programs? So, the role of JSA is to provide evidence-based advice on Australia's skills needs and the adequacy of the skills system in meeting those needs. So, short, medium and long-term skills needs of Australia, and what is the adequacy of our national skills system in meeting those skills needs. And the skills system involves, of course, vocational education training. And if you have a look at the legislation setting up Jobs and Skills Australia, vocational education training gets a lot of mentions. And so we are very much committed to analysing the VET system and its contribution to meeting skills needs, but we're also asked to look at the higher education system and also the migration system. And the aspiration is that we have a joined up national skills system meeting the skills needs of Australia. As it says in that slide, we're attached to DEWA, but we are a statutory body, and I'm a statutory appointment accountable to the Minister, so we operate as an independent body, providing independent advice, but attached to the department who provide resources to us. And the other main thing to say about Jobs and Skills Australia is we operate as a tripartite body, and I think that is in many ways the core distinction between JSA and its predecessor, the National Skills Commission. We've been asked not only to undertake rigorous analytical work on the labour market and on skills needs, but to do it in a way that's deeply connected with the real world, with business, with unions, with education and training providers. And we have a number of bodies with which we need to work very closely in that endeavour. And the first is the Consultative Forum, which the Minister said will become or will be replaced by an advisory board, a tripartite advisory board. And the Consultative Forum that's been established to help me in the establishment of JSA involves people from business unions, from VET and Higher Ed, from TAFE Directors Association, from ITECA, for example. So there's at least one member of the Consultative Forum here, Megan Lilly, who you'll be hearing from later. And it is providing, we had a meeting earlier this week, providing advice from all those important parts of the national skills system. And also, I think, promoting a fantastic dialogue between the key parts of the national skills system. If we can get all of those players working together to create a great national skills system meeting the needs of Australia, then that will be a tremendous achievement. Then working with the states and territories is also extremely important. And so we have a state and territory working group, a lot of consultation and collaboration between JSA, our counterpart organisations in all of the states and territories. And a week or two ago, I met with the Ministerial Council and all the ministers to discuss our work program for the year ahead, which we've been establishing, and very pleased that they are extremely supportive of the work we're doing and pulling together the analysis and ideas from the states and territories, as well as then you go on to the third body that we're working very close with, the Jobs and Skills Councils. So we've got the 10 Jobs and Skills Councils representing the 10 different industry sectors, again, tripartite organisations doing workforce planning for their sectors, as well as development of national training packages, working with the 10 Jobs and Skills Councils, all of the state and territories, to get a joined-up approach to the national skills system is the way that we're seeking to work. I mentioned our legislation, so we're operating at the moment under interim legislation, establishing JSA. There's legislation going through Parliament at the moment to establish it on an ongoing basis, and that slide identifies 8 functions that are in the legislation. We've highlighted 4 in this particular slide that they all have some connection with vocational education training, but I've highlighted 4 in particular. So number 1 there, Australia's current, emerging and future labour market skills and training needs, including relation to apprenticeships. The adequacy of the Australian system for providing VET, including training outcomes, pathways into VET and pathways between VET and higher education, undertaking studies including on opportunities to improve employment, VET and higher education outcomes for disadvantaged cohorts. So VET is very much a focus, but also its complementarity with higher education and with the migration system. So in that context, we've been developing a work plan for JSA to achieve its objective. And this next slide that I call the pyramid slide is really a way of presenting the conceptual framework within which our work plan is devised. And so the third layer there, labour market and skills analysis, is about a lot of research and analysis on labour markets and skills, and builds on the work of the National Skills Commission, and involves a lot of ongoing and regular publications, including analysis of labour market skill needs and skill shortages. And I'll say something about some of those elements shortly. But I think very important to explain that building on that research and analysis is the requirement to provide strategic advice to the key pillars of the national skills system, to governments, but also to vocational education training, to higher education and to migration system in a joined up way, so that between them they can meet the skills needs of Australia. And what we're working towards, and it won't happen quickly, but in a year or so, we're hoping that this will, in partnership with all of our tripartite partners, become a national jobs and skills roadmap. And that will be underpinned by the workforce planning of the Jobs and Skills Councils, the state and territory plans. But we will have the task of trying with them to pull this together into a national jobs and skills roadmap. And we're asked to produce an annual report, and that will morph into a roadmap in due course. And then underpinning all of that is expanding the evidence base. And I'll give you some examples of ways in which we are expanding the evidence base, and then a range of enabling activities that enable us to operate. And there's the annual jobs and skills report that will be, and that the first one will be coming out in early October. And in that we will present our projections of future demand for skills, our analysis of current skill shortages, and our preliminary analysis of the way the national skills system is operating. And strategic advice and deliverables involves analysis and advice to the vet sector, the higher education sector, and the migration system. So there's been a review of the migration system this year, which recommended that Jobs and Skills Australia be the primary source of advice on the skills priorities for the migration system in a way that's complementary to the vet system and the higher education system. And another part of our strategic advice is some major in-depth capacity studies. So this year it's a major study of the clean energy sector and what the skills needs will be, the workforce needs over the next 10, 20, 30 years as we transition to net zero emissions. And that's likely to be followed by an in-depth study of early childhood education and care, and workforce profile studies, including a study of the vet workforce. And I mentioned earlier the vet national data asset, very exciting development from which I will give you a preview of some of the data. So in terms of, I think this slide isn't correctly titled really, it says JSA data products overview. Some of the elements in this diagram are JSA data products. Some of them are ABS and some of them NCVER, but they are they represent the various data sources and products that fit with various aspects of our work. So we analyse current labour market activity, we analyse future labour market activity, education and training activity, and also we're working on classifying and mapping skills. So that gives you the range of types of analysis that we seek to undertake using NCVER data, ABS data, and our own data in things like the nowcast of employment and region by region and occupation, the Internet Vacancy Index, and so on. So the big product of the year, I guess, is the annual jobs and skills report that will aim to bring that together into a coherent story, and will include this year an analysis of skill shortages, projections of labour demand and labour supply and implications for apprenticeships, vet and higher education, scenario analysis, particularly in our clean energy study this year, and a discussion of the implications for the national skills system. So, moving on, I'm going to say something about our work on skills needs and skill shortages. And we're currently forming the 2023 skills priority list, and that will come out with the annual jobs and skills report. But just looking back over the last 2 years, you can see here what's happened to the number of occupations in which skill shortages have been identified as an issue, and 31% of occupations in 2022 were identified as having significant skill shortages, and that was a big increase on the previous year. So as the labour market tightened between 21 and 22, as unemployment came down, vacancies went up, so the number of occupations identified as being with skill shortages went up to that high level. And you heard Minister O'Connor talk about these widespread skill shortages, and a major focus of ours, of course, is how to deal with them. And in the box on the right there, it says skill shortages are most common in the technicians and trades workers occupation group. Skill level 3 occupations, that's certificate 4 and 3 equivalent, have the largest proportion in shortage, 46%. And large employing occupations in these groups include electrician, general, hairdresser, and cook. But many of these shortages are not new and predate the pandemic. And early signs from this year's skill shortage list is that we're going to see roughly the same level of skill shortage this year as we saw last year. So the big increase being between last year and the year before, but holding at roughly the same level with some changes. And that's going through a process of consultation at the moment. One of the interesting aspects of that is, having now had 3 years of the skills priority list, we will, I think, for the first time, have strong evidence of how persistent some skill shortages are. So I think some skeptics around the value of listing skill shortages say that these things change rapidly year on year, whereas the evidence seems to be emerging that there are actually very persistent skill shortages in some areas, and so they are a big challenge that we need to address. So from the 2022 list, there's the top 20 occupations in demand nationally, and you can see obviously near the top of the list, nurses, Asian disabled carers, so that health and care sector, very important in skill shortages. But you'll see quite a lot there in that sort of ICT space as well, software and applications programmers. You work your way down, you'll see other ICT type occupations. And one of the things that we've been doing this year is trying to analyse what are the causes of these skill shortages and how do they differ. So there are quite different types of skill shortages that can be explained in quite different ways, which means that when we advise the national skills system about how to deal with it, in some cases migration might be the solution, in some cases it's BET, some cases it's higher education, some cases it may be to do with the nature of the jobs and the fact that there's a lot of turnover going, a lot of churn, and however much you keep training more people, you're still likely to have skill shortages. And we've used a typology that was developed actually in an NCVER paper, Simon by Sue Richardson some years ago, and in which she categorised skill shortages into these 4 categories: level 1 shortage, level 2 shortage, what we've called suitability gap, and then the skills mismatch group. And you'll see this written up in the quarterly labour market report of Jobs and Skills Australia, that there's been two of those pieces of analysis of a range of occupations. This is taking the top 20 and categorising them into those 4 categories. And you'll see the ones with 1 asterisk are ones which require vocational education and training. So level 1 shortages are shortages where there's strong demand, there's a shortage of, they're hard to fill, and there aren't that many applicants because most of the people with the qualification that could be used are being employed, and so there is a genuine need to train more workers in those areas. And so there you can see in vocational education training, motor mechanics, electricians, metal fitters and mechanics. So they're in the level 1 category. And in this one, it takes quite a while to train the workers. So there is actually quite a challenge, a time challenge of meeting that need. Level 2, similar thing, but it doesn't take so long to if you can get people through those courses. So then the 3rd category, suitability gap, and you'll see that tends to be dominated by occupations that require higher education qualifications, although I notice chefs are in there. Level 3 shortages are where actually employers are having considerable difficulty in filling their vacancies. There's a substantial number of vacancies, there's growing demand, employers are having severe difficulty in filling the vacancies. But actually there are a lot of qualified applicants. And this is the conundrum, I think, for industry and for our education training system, that, for example, in civil engineering and in ICT, business and systems analysts, no shortage of qualified applicants, but when we interrogate what happens with employers in terms of filling those vacancies, they report significant numbers of qualified applicants, but very few suitable applicants. So when we penetrate that further with follow-up research, we find it's to do with lack of experience and lack of employability skills. And that, I think, is something that educators and industry need to work together on. How can we ensure that as we educate and train more people, that they simultaneously get the kind of work experience and the employability skills that they need to be hired by industry? And I think you heard Minister O'Connor, for example, talk about higher apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships, and that, to me, is a very promising avenue for dealing with that suitability gap. The skills mismatch group is one, and you can see Asian disabled carers and child carers in that category. This is one where there's high churn, so workers get trained, they take jobs, but then they don't last that long. And so it's in this sector, yes, we can try and increase the amount of training and education, but we also have to pay regard to the design of the jobs and the professional opportunities for people in those jobs, and make it a more attractive kind of occupation. And that you've seen an attempt to move in that direction with improving the rewards to Asian disabled carers. There are similar issues with child carers. So you can see it's not only the skills system that has to do something here. The labour market has some challenges in terms of the attractiveness of jobs to people to stay for a long time. And we're still working on some of those top 20 to figure out which category to put them in. And sometimes, you know, that you could say there's elements of all of these influences. But you can tell how if that sort of in-depth analysis of skill shortages is what is needed to know which levers to pull in dealing with skill shortages. To what extent do you vet higher ed? To what extent do you work on the jobs themselves? To what extent do you change the nature of the education training? To what extent might we need to use the migration system? Looking further forward, what does the future jobs market look like, and what do we expect to be the growing occupations? And I'm going to present to you just a little bit of data on the analysis that was done last year. So this year we're actually working with Janine Dixon at the Centre of Policy Studies at Victoria University that do employment projections for a number of the states and territories. And because we're working closely with the states and territories, we're also producing national forecasts, employment projections. Janine is working on us with that. So that will get published in the annual Jobs and Skills Report. Last year, the National Skills Commission previously did forecasts up to 2026, and there you can see that the key takeout is most of the growth in employment is happening where some tertiary qualification is needed, and in those particular projections, 53% with a bachelor degree or higher qualification, 39% with Cert 2, 3, 4, advanced diploma and so on, vocational education qualifications. As you may have noticed, in the last year, it's actually been, the last year or so, it's actually been, the growth in employment has been greatest in the VET qualified workforce, not so much the higher education workforce. So I'll overlay that with data for what's actually been going on in recent times. And you can see that the big growth in employment that's been occurring, and that's for the 12 months to February 2023, has actually been in in the vocational education qualification. So you can see the importance of VET in the current growth in demand for skilled workers. Just a few of the kind of themes that run through these occupations in demand. We talk about the 5 C's: care, cognitive ability, computing, communication, climate. These are 5 of the themes that pervade a lot of the skill shortages. And an example in the care sector in terms of the projections we've had in the past up to 2026, projected 28% growth in Asian disabled carers. And then in the cognitive ability, management and organisation analysts projected to grow by 32%. In the computing, software and applications programmers projected to grow by 27%. In the human resource managers, projected to grow by 16%. Just some examples that fit under the 5 C's. The last one being climate. New and emerging jobs due to climate change will provide new pathways for work for job seekers. And as Minister O'Connor said, this year we're doing a major in-depth study of clean energy, the Clean Energy Capacity Study. And I won't read all of that out, but what we're very focused on defining what the clean energy workforce is, and examining a number of transition scenarios towards net zero, and exploring the employment opportunities that will occur under this transition. And of course, some areas are declining, and that means how are we going to adjust? For those workers in declining sectors, will those in coal mining be able to go into renewable energy, for example? And assessing the extent to which skill needs can be met by existing workers, and to what extent it will be new workers, and how can the vet and higher ed system support this process, and do we need some reform along the way? And we're working closely with Treasury and the Climate Change Department, who've been working with Deloitte Access Economics in analysing future scenarios to net zero. So we're leveraging off that work to adapt it to analysing the workforce implications, and building on transitions identified by the energy regulator, but also incorporating a sort of an energy superpower scenario in which Australia becomes a major exporter of manufactured goods enabled by renewable energy, which is a vision that this government is clearly interested in. So there'll be a range of scenarios that will vary in the scale and impact and in the amount of change being required. But then we'll think through what are the implications for VET, what are the implications for higher ed, and just some initial thinking about that subject. In VET, you'll see the hybrid model. So this is the idea that VET and higher ed may need to work more closely together to create the kind of skills that we need. There are quite a few new employers new to the training system that will need to be worked with to help their way through this transition. There'll be need for some new courses, and of course there needs to be a focus on the workforce. So watch this space. That report will be coming out in the next few months too, and we'll get some coverage in our National Jobs and Skills Report. So finally, I'm going to go on to expanding the evidence base, and I'm going to talk about 3 aspects of expanding the evidence base, of which one is the new VET National Data Asset. And the first one I want to mention, though, is foundation skills, which is something the Minister particularly mentioned. And he said, I think, that in the last survey of foundation skills, literacy, adult literacy and numeracy, about 3 million adult Australians were found not to have those foundation skills that would enable them to participate successfully in the labour market. But that was over 10 years ago now. In the PIAC study, part of an OECD international study, that we had that data. Since then, we haven't had any follow-up information, and it's a big issue about which we need to find out more. And so, sorry, I'll need to go back. So this is what we're doing. A survey of Australian adults to assess their current literacy numeracy skills, a feasibility study into how to assess the literacy numeracy and digital literacy levels of First Nations people, and an analysis of Commonwealth administrative data into priority groups, called groups, people living with disability, women. And so over a period of time, we will get the administrative data being used, we'll do a pilot study, and then we will do a national study in which we're hoping to find evidence for those groups that are most challenged with digital skills. This is a big survey challenge. How do you successfully survey people, for example, in remote areas who don't have literacy and numeracy skills or digital skills? That's an issue that we're taking a lot of advice on, but this is very important data to be obtained. So, conscious of the time, I think we're running a little bit behind time. The next one I'll perhaps pass over very quickly. One of the interesting pieces of work, building on work done by the National Skills Commission, is trying to develop a typology of vet providers, which the current typology has this problem that the majority of them are in one category, private providers. So we've been working on developing a more detailed typology, and you might like to ask questions about that, but given the time available, I think I'll just alert you to the fact that's being done. We're consulting with people about it, but I think that will give a richer understanding of the diversity of vet providers in Australia. So finally, the exciting Vet National Data Asset, which that slide explains, is combining NCVER total vet activity data with other administrative data sources. The ATO's personal income tax data, DSS income support data, and this could in principle be expanded into higher education in the future. And that slide explains that this is sort of longitudinal data over a period of time. Goes back to when the unique student identifier was introduced in 2015. And the preliminary results that I'm going to share with you now relate to those people who completed VET in 2018-19. So we've got them back to 2015 through the unique student identifier. We've followed their progress. And these are people who completed a VET course in 2018 and 19. And so the value of these data, as you can see, combining income tax data, social security data, we can follow what happens to their income, whether they've come off income support, what courses they've completed. And this is opening up huge possibilities for richer understanding of the pathways that vet students experience. And this can be done in course level analysis, field of education analysis, and by demographic characteristics. And within the next few months, a report on analysing these data we'll be producing. It's work going on in the data lab at the ABS with this confidentiality requirements being very important to adhere to, of course. And we're just starting the process of consulting with key stakeholders such as the states and territories. There'll be a meeting next week about some of the emerging data. But I'll just share with you a couple of slides that give you a bit of an idea about some of the things that we can do. So this is about median employee income post-training. And this is the top 20 qualifications by number of completions. And you'll see that we've compared the tax data on median employee income with the survey of student outcomes from the NCVER survey. And pleasingly, we're finding a good correlation. So that gives some confidence in the existing data, measuring income in a slightly different way. So you wouldn't expect identical outcomes. One of the advantages of being able to use these administered data is that rather than it being survey data, it's more comprehensive. So you can get information for more qualifications. So, for example, Cert 3 and supply chain operations. There we've got the median employee income, which is not available from the survey of student outcomes. And so that's an example. This next one is going to be about courses that help people to move off income support. What are the top courses that help people move off income support that target lower level sort of foundation skills that help people to start engaging in the workforce? I'll explain what the yellow shaded areas are in a minute, but you can see, interestingly enough, that in this analysis, the one that had the highest percentage of participants moving off income support, the Certificate 2 and Applied Digital Technologies. And the two yellow shaded numbers there, one points out that the median age is 47 and 45% had achieved less than year 12 education level prior to doing this course. So in other words, as it says on the right-hand side, the key cohorts participating in mature age with low digital literacy, but 30% moved off income support on completion of that course. The second one there, Certificate 3 in Community Services, people moving into care and support occupations. So 28% moving off income support after completing the course, and you can see 77% of those are females. So that's why we've got females in the right-hand column being a key characteristic of that group. Certificate 2 in Skills for Work and Vocational Pathways, 22% coming off income support, and 18% being First Nations people. So and 53% with less than year 12 education. So the characteristic of that group dominating being low foundation skills and a significant number of First Nations people. I won't go through all the others and the details of them, but the Certificate 3 in Entrepreneurship and New Businesses there, Certificate 3 in Supply Chain Operations, Certificate 2 in Spoken and Written English. So that just gives you a flavour, just a taste of what's going to be possible from the VET National Data Asset. I think this is a good example of expanding the evidence base on which we can analyse the success of the national skills system in meeting the skills needs of Australia. So in conclusion, let me say that that it's a very exciting period, the establishment of JSA. It's been a privilege to be given the opportunity to lead its establishment, working closely with NCVER, working closely with the states and territories, working closely with jobs and skills councils, with education and training providers, trying to get a joined-up approach to the migration system, the VET system, the higher education system, working with business and unions to achieve the skills needs of the future. And we think we're uniquely positioned to play that strategic role. There's the first point there. Secondly, data analysis and research provides key insights on the diverse role of VET in the labour market and the extent to which VET sector produces a pipeline of workers to address skills in shortages both now and into the future. And JSA is working hard to help build the VET evidence database to ensure students, training providers, industry and government make better decisions about what courses to study, offer, promote and subsidise, and the VET National Data Asset represents a major advance in this respect. Thanks very much.